Today is Wednesday, March 13th. Welcome to this edition of Political Update here on the Atlanta News First app on YouTube and all of our streaming apps. I'm Tim Darnell. Today's stream is produced, as always, by producer Maria Moreau, and it's been a very eventful 24 to 48 hours here in Atlanta and in Georgia politics. Here are some of the headlines that we're following right now. Georgia, along with three other states, voted in their respective presidential primaries on Tuesday. Both President Biden and former President Donald Trump have clinched their respective nominations. Earlier today, Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee dismissed a half dozen of the indictment charges filed in Fulton County against former President Donald Trump and several others. We are anticipating this week, at any moment, a decision on whether or not Fulton DA Fani Willis and perhaps others will be disqualified from their indictment and prosecution of former President Trump. And finally, in less than 90 minutes, Governor Brian Kemp will sign a new piece of legislation that is designed to discipline and oversee locally elected district attorneys. But now going back to the results of yesterday, Georgia, Mississippi, Washington State, and Hawaii all held their respective presidential primaries for the Democratic and Republican parties on Tuesday. Georgia saw a very light turnout in an election that was called very early on in the evening by the Associated Press, CBS News, and several others, where we saw President Joe Biden officially become, or presumptively become, the Democratic nominee for president in 2024, and also former President Donald Trump presumptively becoming the Republican nominee also for the White House. This election will mark the first time since 1956 that the same two candidates have faced each other in a national presidential election. Our hardworking political reporter Doug Reardon has this wrap-up of what happened in Georgia yesterday.
2024 presidential election after President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump won enough delegates to become their party's presumptive nominees in yesterday's primaries.
We have to win an election, and we should win it by a lot, because there's never been anybody worse at doing that job than Joe Biden.
In a statement claiming victory, the Biden-Harris campaign described Trump's campaign of one of, quote, resentment, revenge, and retribution that threatens the very idea of America. It's a message Vice President Kamala Harris echoed yesterday in Colorado.
The former president has told us who he is. It's on us, then, to recognize the threat he poses.
Both candidates swept Tuesday's primaries in Washington State, Mississippi, and Georgia, now a crucial battleground where Trump holds a slight edge in a new CBS poll.
This is a big state that is considered really important, and I just think that it's going to be even more important than it was last time.
Though both sides will also have to work to win over voters who are not thrilled to see a Biden-Trump rematch.
I would love to see our country represented not by someone in their 80s who's a white man.
Today, President Biden kicks off back-to-back trips to multiple states in the Midwest, first traveling to Wisconsin, then Michigan tomorrow. Trump is expected to rally in Ohio over the weekend. Jared Hill, CBS News.
That was not our political reporter, Doug Reardon. That was CBS News political reporter Jared Hill talking about the fact that Donald Trump and Joe Biden will once again be facing each other this year on November 5th in a rematch of their 2020 election. An election that was really and truly decided by what happened here in the battleground state of Georgia. Both men were in Georgia on Saturday. Donald Trump in Rome, Georgia, President Joe Biden here in Atlanta, really highlighting the importance of how Georgia will truly decide the next occupant of the Oval Office in Washington, D.C. Now, here is our political reporter, Doug Reardon.
100 miles apart here in Georgia, and brought with them a very similar message to voters. Cast a ballot for me in November or risk the very soul of America.
It's a contest between competing forces in the battle for the soul of this nation.
He's a threat to democracy. I will tell you, he's a threat to democracy.
As a rematch between two old political rivals becomes more and more likely, President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump traveled to Georgia Saturday to make their presence known in the battleground state. Trump was greeted by a friendly crowd in the more rural city of Rome. Biden was in metro Atlanta, a crucial Democratic stronghold in the purple state, just days after his fiery State of the Union address.
Joe Biden should not be shouting angrily at America. America should be shouting angrily at Joe Biden.
And Trump and I have a very different value set, if it isn't obvious already. Mine is based on core values that have defined America.
Biden kept his focus mostly on economic policies, canceling student loan debt, job creation, and affordable housing. He made no mention of the conflict in Gaza, even despite a brief interruption from a protester. Biden also briefly discussed immigration policy, hammering Trump for past disparaging comments.
Instead of celebrating the contribution of immigrants to our country, to our economy and our communities, Donald Trump calls them vermin, poisoning the blood of America.
But the president made no mention of the recent death of Laken Riley, the 22-year-old nursing student found dead on the University of Georgia campus last month. Her accused killer is an undocumented immigrant. With Riley's parents backstage, Trump wasted no time getting to the subject as people held up posters bearing Riley's face.
He was illegal, and I say he was an illegal alien. He was an illegal immigrant. He was an illegal migrant. And he shouldn't have been in our country, and he never would have been under the Trump policy.
Biden also made no mention of Trump's ongoing criminal prosecution in Fulton County for election interference. But Trump ripped into District Attorney Fani Willis over her relationship with a prosecutor that could put her involvement in the case in jeopardy.
Now, speaking of Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, a decision was issued earlier this morning, Wednesday morning, around 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time from Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee. Now, the decision, the ruling that was issued by Judge McAfee earlier today, dismissed 6 of the numerous indictments filed by Fulton County DA Fani Willis against President Trump and more than a dozen of his Republican allies in August 2023. Now, these charges, 3 of which were directly related to Donald Trump himself, revolve around allegations that the former president tried to solicit Georgia's elected officials to violate their oaths of office. That included a charge related to the January 2nd, 2021 phone call made from the White House, from the Oval Office, by then-President Donald Trump to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, a call for which we have the full audio and transcript available for listening and reading on Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com. But Judge McAfee also left the door wide open for prosecutors to file future charges related to those allegations. Rebecca Schramm has this report.
In a court order, Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee wrote that 6 of the many counts in the Georgia election interference case against former President Donald Trump and his co-defendants must be quashed. 3 of the charges being dismissed are against Trump himself. The charges in question involve alleged efforts by the defendants to solicit elected officials to violate their oaths of office, including 2 charges related to the post-2020 election phone call Trump made to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. In his order, McAfee writes that prosecutors erred in the wording of parts of the indictment, noting in part, as written, these 6 counts contain all of the essential elements of the crime, but fail to allege sufficient detail regarding the nature of their commission, i.e. the underlying felony solicited.
As we're also about to hear from Rebecca Schramm in another report, we are anticipating a decision this week, before the end of the week, whether or not DA Fani Willis and perhaps others, perhaps Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade, will be disqualified from their prosecution and subsequent indictment of Donald Trump and several of his Republican allies. Again, Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee is deciding whether or not Fani Willis and Nathan Wade or others engaged in any level of financial impropriety because of their admitted and acknowledged romantic relationship that occurred during the course of their investigation. Scott McAfee has yet to comment or has yet to decide on this particular matter, and we are again anticipating a decision anytime between now and the end of the week. Again, here is Rebecca Schramm.
The judge indicated that he will have a decision in this case by this Friday. A lot has happened surrounding this case since that bombshell court filing that put DA Fani Willis in the hot seat. A state Senate committee started hearing testimony last week about the relationship between Willis and Nathan Wade, the man she hired to lead the Trump case. They're accused of misusing taxpayer funds and crossing ethical boundaries. They've admitted they were romantically involved, but they deny any conflict of interest or misuse of public funds. Meanwhile, 2 people have entered the race to replace Willis as district attorney, and 2 other people are challenging Judge McAfee, Scott McAfee, who is presiding over the Trump case. Here's part of what Trump said about Fani Willis last weekend at a rally here in Georgia, followed by an attorney with her thoughts on how this might play out.
So corrupt Fani Willis hired her lover, Nathan Wade, so they could fraudulently make money together. Let's make money, darling. Let's see, who can we go after? Well, if we go after somebody that nobody ever heard of, we can't make much. I got an idea. Let's do what Joe Biden and everybody else want. Let's go after Trump.
So in terms of whether or not any of the allegations are true, some of them could be true. She could have failed to disclose the relationship, and that would be improper. But again, you have to establish how her failure to disclose her relationship with Attorney Wade impacted the legal rights of that.
Judge McAfee is considering whether to remove Willis, Wade, or both from the case. As soon as we get an idea of when he might make that announcement, we'll let you know. At the Fulton County Courthouse, Rebecca Schramm, Atlanta News First.
Now, in Rebecca Schramm's package, she also mentioned that Fani Willis, Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee, have both qualified for this year's 2024 elections, as will all of Georgia's 14 congressional districts will be decided this year, as well as the more than 100 state legislative seats that come up for re-election every 2 years, as does Congress. As I mentioned, all 14 congressional districts will feature a Democrat and a Republican vying for those respective nominations. The Georgia's 3rd congressional seat, which is in western Georgia and contains a portion of Metro Atlanta, is Georgia's only open congressional seat in 2024. Republican Congressman Drew Ferguson announced his retirement late last year, leaving that seat wide open. Also, Democrats Lucy McBath in the 6th Congressional District and Democrat David Scott in the 13th District, both districts in Metro Atlanta, well within the Metro Atlanta statistical area, are both facing primary challenges on May 21st, and we will bring those hugely important Georgia primary results to you as they occur from now until Election Day, May 21st of this year, as well as any runoffs that occur. And finally, in just less than an hour and a half, I should say, we will be carrying live from the state capitol a signing ceremony held at the state capitol by Governor Brian Kemp, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, and several others. Brian Kemp will sign into law a new bill establishing the operating rules and procedures for the Georgia Prosecuting Attorney Oversight Commission. Now, this is an agency that was adopted in last year's legislative session as a measure to oversee locally elected district attorneys, like perhaps even Fani Willis here in Fulton County, or perhaps Deborah Gonzalez, who is the locally elected DA in Athens and Clark County. District attorneys who may be seen to not fully prosecute serious crimes to their fullest extent, or even perhaps be a little overzealous in prosecution of certain other crimes. Now, as I mentioned, the Georgia Supreme Court late last year threw out the operating rules and procedures for the commission. Otherwise, it would already be in full operation and operating with full vigor. However, the Georgia Supreme Court ruled that the commission's operating guidelines did not adhere to other state agency standards. So what will be happening at 3 p.m., and we will be carrying this event live here on Atlanta News First on our YouTube and our streaming platforms, Governor Brian Kemp will sign a bill that will again formally establish the operating rules and procedures for the Prosecuting Attorneys Oversight Commission, and we'll be carrying that event here live again on Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com as Georgia continues its role as a premier battleground state on the nation's political spectrum.